Welcome to this introduction to the Spectralink Kirk 400 and Spectralink Kirk 6500 series server hardware. Spectralink have recently released two DECT wireless servers. They are IP based. The Kirk KWS400 replaces the old series KWS300. The advantages of the 400 over the 300, it is far more expandable with various options along with different licensing options, which also includes the Microsoft Link license and for certified connection. The KWS6500 series replaces the KWS6000. It is built on a brand new platform, which is 19-inch rack mount, so that it can be continued for its product development. The 6500 series is also Microsoft Link certified. Just a note that the KWS6000 is still available, but will be discontinued in the coming months. This presentation is a webinar which was being recorded earlier. As the two new generation platforms are the basis of our DECT wireless offering, and can integrate with a wide range of unified communication platforms, ranging from your hybrid IP platforms through to full soft switch connections, and through to also IT telco direct connections. The webinar will cover off basically sales and a bit of a minor technical side of things, with configuration and capacities of it, the licensing options, new mounting options, and the redundancy options of the 6500. We'll now just move straight into the webinar presentation.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Nigel Keswick. Thank you again for your attendance. Today we're just going to go through and explain some of the changes that have happened in some of the new Spectralink Kirk DECT products that are coming out. So there is a new product which is called the KWS400. This KWS400 is to replace the KWS300 system that we've had around for quite a few years now. I'll try to go through and explain some of the differences, and and in this presentation we'll provide you with information on part numbers, configurations of systems, and some features and benefits that we have now, and some of the new products that are actually out there. So we'll kick off with the KWS400 first. So the KWS400 is again very similar to the KWS300 in the initial stages of the system, how it builds. It starts off with the main equipment, KWS400, which replaces, as I said, the 300. There is, when a default as a system comes out of the box, it's built-in 6 speech channels and the capability to support up to 12 users. It has a built-in radio as well with 12 channels on it too. So same again as the 300 used to be. As a standalone system, you can just run it as a 400 with up to 6 channels for concurrent SIP calls and up to 12 users. Then the system can be licensed, which this is where the new and exciting part of the 400 over the 300, which increases capabilities and capacities and does actually make quite a powerful system, as you'll soon see. So a licensing option, we can actually add a license to it. And I've also put in red here for you is the part numbers that you can order the different components with as well too. So use licensing option is to increase it to 12 channels from the 6 speech channels, and up to 30 SIP users as well, and that just by applying a license. And there's also another license available, which is a link license. So this system's link certified. So by applying the link license, you activate the link system features. Then we have an additional license as well too, so you can do 3 additional IP bases. So that's one of the big advantages of the 400 now, is it can actually be expanded out to be a multi-cell system where, by the use of additional IP bases. So you still have the the 400 with its inbuilt radio, but now you can actually have up to 3 additional IP bases surrounding that to increase the coverage, the similar that you would do with the 300, just purely with repeaters. You can still use repeaters on the 400 as well. As we go a bit further through, I'll show you an exploded diagram of the system and expansion, how big it can be. Then also now you can apply a G729 license to the 400 as well, where before on the 300 the license was not available for G729. You had to go to the bigger systems to be able to have that feature. So by applying the license now, you activate a G729 software codec. Then there's some combination licenses too that you can buy too. So you can start to bundle this with the combination licenses, which is 12 channels, 30 users, and the link license, all by just purchasing the one part number would give you the licenses for all those features as well. And then there's the combination again, which is 12 channels, 30 users, link license plus the multi-cell license. There's also available now on the 400 to be able to do TLS and SRTP, so that's basically security now on the links back to whatever SIP server that you're using. So we can now use the transport layer security and real-time transport security as well. So and you'll find that might be a requirement in some tenders or site-specific requirements. So it stops eavesdropping in across the links and hackers or spoofers. So another advantage again on the 400. And then there's the automatic alarm call license. This automatic alarm call license is on the handsets and the Kirk handsets. You can, when you apply the license to the system, it activates the field in the handset, which allows you to put a phone number underneath the alarm or the buttons on the phone. So you can program the 0 to 9 and the alarm button on the top of the handsets, or the alarm buttons on the features, so that you can allow it to, when you push that button, it'll actually dial a phone number. If you wanted to use an alarm feature which is connected via a third-party messaging platform, so you're connected to a third-party messaging platform, you push the alarm button on the phone, that MSF feature is still a standard feature which will go out to the third-party server, and then a message can be generated, or the third-party server can manipulate that however it likes to. That doesn't require an alarm license. That is a standard feature in the DECT protocol, and the Kirk protocol. So it's only if you require the handset to push the alarm button and to actually dial a phone number, that's when you need this automatic alarm call license. So there's also a few other power options now which are available on the KWS400, where the KWS300 was a purely a PoE device, and it's the only way it could be driven. Now on the bottom of the 400 we have availability now to run a plug pack. So you can run it off a plug pack to drive the system if you have a customer that doesn't have a PoE switch. You still can utilise a PoE injector if you like, via the Ethernet port, which is on the bottom. So you have the options now, 2 options, either drive a PoE or via plug pack. Okay, so the same plug pack that's used is what we use on the KWS6000, and it was the same on the KWS500 and one of the older systems, so it's the same across the whole lot. Now, we have one question just quickly, which is when you enable multi-cell from the 400, is the radio disabled in the 400? No, it's not. You still have the radio in that 400, so you've increased it. In theory, you have 4 cells now, the 3 additional IP bases, plus the 400 itself, which is an IP base in its own right. Mounting options. So change with the mounting options. There's now using 2 orientations, so you can have the connector up or connector down. On the back you can see now you can mount the base stations up and down. In the past, all Kirk infrastructure needed to be mounted in the horizontal position with the connectors on the bottom. That was to do with the antennas layout and the some of the DECT technology that was in the chipsets that was available at the time, but more the antenna layouts on the base stations. And that's now been changed, and they've used some new antenna technology, which allows us to give us the options to mount the connector on the top or the bottom. If you didn't do it in the old systems, you really had an issue with handover between bases. Now that you don't have to do that, it makes a big difference. So big advantage is now when you're mounting on the ceiling, the cables can go straight up as opposed to going up from the side. So now if you've got a ceiling, you can actually mount the base station underneath the ceiling, and the connector will go up and straight through the ceiling tile, just making it look a lot neater. Which would look like there's a drawing there to show you how, in the past, how we had to mount the base stations. The other change that's been made on the system too is they've introduced a directional antenna on the back of the base station, or the KWS400, sorry. The reason for this is now allows for the directional antenna. So if you've got IP bases which you're running around on the outsides of the system, it just gives you the advantage to be able to mount that IP base station a bit further away where it's not in the coverage like you would normally require, but you can pick up that signal via a sync via the directional antenna, or repeaters via that directional antenna, where you might have to mount the advantages here is you can mount the 400 inside a building, but you want to do coverage outside to a remote building. You can put the directional antenna through the wall and on the outside of the building. You still have the coverage via that internal antenna, will give you your normal coverage. This directional antenna will then allow the signal to penetrate out in a directional motion towards another base station, or to a repeater to allow for it to connect to it. Okay, so just an example there, or how we might have it structured and set up. You've got the base station mounted inside a building, and then you've got a directional antenna outside, picking up the signal from the repeater in a remote building which isn't strong enough for its signal to reach the 400. So it can either be a base station or a repeater. So installation, example, we might have a KWS400, then we can have 3 repeaters off that KWS400. So this is like equivalent to what we would have in a 300 almost. Then we can log those repeaters back onto the 400. We can then have an additional base station license, multi-cell license, which allows us to have 3 more IP bases. And then on those IP bases, we can have 3 more repeaters on each base. So you can see we're starting to create quite a large coverage area in our capabilities, and the fact that we can also go up to 30 users as well on the system. The next system after that, but just quickly, if anyone's got any questions, you can pop them up there now on the 400 before we move on to the 6500. But the main points to take away is obviously it starts off as a smaller size system with the ability for 6 channels or 6 users, concurrent calls up to 12 users, and then we expand it up to 12 calls and 30 users, and then this is all done by licensing after that, and then we can increase the capacity of the system by, or the features on the system by adding additional licenses for features that we might want to require to use, like your codecs or link options or security or alarm calls. Okay, so the 6500 is a new replacement for the KWS6000. The main differentiators is the 6500 is now a rack mountable system as opposed to the 6000, and obviously the neater and ability to mount that with built-in power supply as well, so that we're not having to run plug packs into the systems like we did on the 6000s. There's some advancements obviously in the processing power and the capabilities of this system as the new DECT chipsets and the memory obviously becomes more powerful, and they've increased the capacities on these systems. But in all intents and purposes, what you do see right now in the feature changes is the fact that the system's now rack mountable. So it's 1 RU rack mounted system. Out of the box, it supports 32 users, 256 bases, has a built-in media resource, which will do 32 channels at G711. very similar to the 6000. There's an integrated power supply in the system, and that supplies the card slot for the cards that go into there, which we'll see. So we can have in the 6500 server, you can have 2 additional media resources. So if you have a larger system which requires more than 32 concurrent calls, you can then install additional media resources into the 6500, which will increase its capacity from there. So the hardware we look at, there's not a lot of components to the system, which makes it easy and simple. We have the KWS Server 6500 in-rack cabinet, that's what it's known as. It's a KWS 6500 in-rack cabinet which has got a built-in power supply and CPU. It can support 2 additional media resource cards, so you'll have the CPU plus 2 additional media resource cards in there to full capacity on that one cabinet chassis. The next component is a media resource in-rack cabinet. So in this one here, it's a media resources included in the cabinet. So this would be additional to after we've expanded the system and you need more than the 2 media resources in the master cabinet, and you require some additional in the server cabinet, you require additional media resources. You can buy a media resource cabinet, and that comes with 1 media resource card already in it. And the same thing too, you can add 2 additional media resources. So when it's full capacity, you're adding another 96 channels all up on that additional media cabinet. Again, we don't see a lot of use of the other media resources. A lot of the times, customers obviously say, you know, we need to have capacity for everyone to be on the phone at once. But once you start to take statistics on a system, even on large systems we've got out there, that you find that, you know, you're talking 20 to 30 is a very busy system, concurrent calls at one point. So the third component that you can have now is the media resource card itself. Okay, so that's the 3 hardware components: is the Kirk Wireless Server 6500 in-rack cabinet, the media resource rack cabinet for 6500, and media resource cards. They're the 3 hardware components that you have. So quick review there. I've got the part numbers now here for you too as well. So you've got the 6500 rack thing, and that's the part number to order. If you just require media resource rack cabinet, that's the part number to order, and then the media resource itself is the part number to order for those things. So as I said, they're just the hardware components that build up the 6500 system. Oh, one more, sorry, additional. There is base stations obviously to put on the system that you need, and repeaters as well, but the components for the system itself are those 3 components. So then we go to licensing, because then obviously the system can be changed by some additional licenses. So as I said, default there's 32 users on the system, and then there's a license if you wish to expand out the users to up to 150. Then there's another additional license that you can use which takes it to 500 users. And then there's a license for up to 4,096 users, which is the system capacity. The license and also for master license for when you want to use a 6500 redundancy. So it's the same license as the 6000 6500. And there's the part numbers for them as well. There's a license for the redundant system, so the backup system. If you have a master system and a backup system, it's actually called an ARI swap license. When you're ordering these systems too, if you do order a license for a backup or a redundancy, you need to provide the ARI number of the system ID number of the master system, and that's then used to generate the license for the backup system. But if you're ordering them together, that's all done automatically for you anyway. Then there's also another license which allows you to do link interop and security package. It's all integrated into one license. And you can also just buy the security license on itself. And the Kirk alarm license, call license, which again is to enable the handsets to be able to dial a phone number when you push the alarm button, as opposed to an alarm being generated via the MSF feature back to a third-party messaging platform. So that's a bit confusing for some people, that alarm call license, but if you just remember that, it's not a problem. Okay. The other thing to be wary of too, when you are ordering these on the other one thing on the licensing, when you have a master and redundant system, you need to order licenses for both systems. So they have to be licensed and both to the same size if you want them to work that way. And third, the last license that we've got there is a G729 license again. A big advantage now on this system. Before on the 6000, if you wanted to use a G729, you had to buy a hardware codec and place that into the systems onto the media resources or into the 6000 server itself. And that reduced the codec availability from 32 users down to 24. Now with the G729 license, you still have 32 available codecs at G729. So again, it's a slight advantage. Then we have the repeaters that we have in the system now. So obviously there's three types of repeaters that we can use on both either the 400 or the 6500. Repeaters with 4-channel, that's a multi-cell. You've got a repeater with 2 channels and external antenna connector. That's the same, these parts haven't changed a lot from what we've had in the past. And then you've got a repeater with 4 channels now and an external antenna connector, which is fairly new. That's a new part number really. So again, the external antenna is used if you want to replace a repeater remotely. So you might have a site that's you want to have a coverage on an outbuilding somewhere, which might be a pump station or a guardhouse, or and you don't need coverage in between, but you need to cover that remote area and you have no way of getting cabling to it. You can use a repeater for that and link it back via that directional antenna to appropriate base station or other repeater that you need. Simple rule when you're doing these systems now, because the 400 is a multi-cell system now as opposed to the 300, which was a single cell, only sell multi-cell repeaters, which we'll find that will probably be the only repeaters that are stocked very shortly anyway. So now we look at the redundancy on the 6500, and just to give it a rundown actually on a breakdown of what the redundancy is, it's a lot more than you think. It's just not a redundant server. It does provide some other information. So applying the master license to the 6500 that's capable of redundancy and provides new tabs when you need information. So you have a slave and a peer system, and when you apply the backup license to a 6500, then the capability of the redundancy is provided and the new tabs from the master system is only used. So it also includes an ARI swap license. So when we put, what that basically means is, so when you apply the backup license to a system, it automatically tells it that in a failure, it will use the ARI number of the master. That's why when we generate the license, we have to use the master's ARI number in the system there. So how does it work? So when a system is set up as a master slave, the master interface is used to make all the changes. So we only ever connect to the master. We use that to create new users, to administer base stations, to view statistics and logs. But the other little catch here, which isn't really noted well, is that the database and the traffic is load balanced, so across both controllers, which is a feature which really it doesn't actually, isn't sort of described well by saying it's just a purely redundant system. So by that we're sharing the load and the capacities across both systems, master and slave. If the master controller fails, then all the database is taken over by the slave controller, and that automatically will register all the users over to that system there. And the changeover default is 15 seconds, so the system is off the air, or half the users will be off the air for about 15 seconds till they move over to the new database on the slave system. And then all of a sudden, then all administration is now available and everything via that slave system until either the master system is rectified. And this could be just a breakdown in Ethernet connectivity to that master system. There might be someone's pulled a patch lead by accident, or power, unplugged the power, or whatever, or there is a fault, genuine fault. Either way, after 15 seconds of not being able to poll that master from the slave, it'll take over its role as master.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this presentation. If you have any queries or questions, please do not hesitate to contact us. Thank you.